wiped the grease from his hands as the transport ship's engines hummed to life beneath the deck plates. The Wanderer's rest wasn't much to look at, a battered cargo hauler held together by prayer and cheap welding, but it had brought him this far into the Outer Rim territories. 3 months of travel from Earth's colonies, chasing rumors of work that didn't involve corporate oversight or military contracts. The spaceport buzzed with activity as alien vessels of every conceivable design docked and departed. Shouldered his worn duffel bag containing everything he owned, some clothes, basic tools, and with his engineering credentials. The credentials that had gotten him laughed out of hearing offices from Mars, too. Another human engineer, they'd say, barely hiding their amusement. How quaint. The galaxy had moved beyond human technology decades ago. While Earth's children struggled to perfect fusion drives and basic gravity manipulation, species like the had mastered dimensional folding. The crystalline built computers that thought faster than entire human cities. Even the barbaric raiders used energy weapons that made human plasma rifles look like children's toys. Stepped onto the station platform, immediately hit by the cacophony of alien languages and the sharp scent of exotic atmospheres being filtered through life support systems. Towering merchants haggled with traders while small groups of moved through the crowds like living prisms, their crystalline bodies catching and refracting the station's harsh lighting. "You lost, little human." Turned to find a blocking his path. The reptilian warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scales a mottled green-brown that spoke of countless battles. Ceremonial scars covered his arms, and a plasma rifle hung casually across his back. 2 smaller flanked him, their eyes fixed on with predatory interest. "Just looking for work," replied, keeping his voice steady. He'd learned long ago that showing fear to predators only made them hungrier. The lead's mouth split into what might have been a grin, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Work? What could a soft skin do here? Perhaps cleaning waste recyclers, scrubbing cargo holds." "I'm an engineer." The laughter that erupted from the 3 aliens drew stares from nearby beings. Even a passing group of paused, their harmonic voices creating a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze as they apparently shared some private joke. "Human engineer," the leader wheezed between laughs. "Next you'll tell us you're a warrior too." Felt the familiar burn of humiliation in his chest, but forced himself to remain calm. "I might be able to help with whatever's giving you trouble. That plasma rifle on your back, for instance. I can hear the power coupling failing from here. You've got maybe 50 shots left before it's scrap metal." The laughter stopped abruptly. This hand moved to the weapon and caught the slight wince as his fingers found a hairline crack in the casing. "Lucky guess," the alien growled. "Not luck. Your weapon uses a Mark VII power core, but someone modified it with components. The resonance frequency is all wrong. Give it another day and the whole thing will overload." The studied with new interest, his predatory gaze taking on a calculating quality. "And you could fix this?" "Probably, though I'd need to see your ship's workshop." What happened next surprised everyone, including. The alien threw back his head and laughed, not the mocking sound from before, but genuine amusement. "Bold, I like bold. Very well, human. I am of the Blood Fang. You will come aboard our vessel and prove your words. If you succeed, we will discuss employment. If you fail..." He let the threat hang in the recycled air. The Blood Fang was exactly what expected from a raider. All sharp angles and intimidating weapon arrays, built more for psychological warfare than efficiency. The workshop, however, was surprisingly well equipped. Tools from a dozen different species lined the walls, many of which recognized despite their alien origins. Physics was physics, after all. His plasma rifle was indeed on the verge of catastrophic failure. The power regulator had been installed backwards, creating a feedback loop that would eventually cause the core to go critical. A simple fix, if you knew what to look for. Worked in silence while and his crew watched. They'd gathered around the workbench like spectators at a gladiatorial match, waiting to see the human embarrass himself. The rifle's components were laid out in precise order, had learned early in his career that organization was the difference between success and disaster. "There," he said finally, reassembling the weapon with practiced efficiency. "The regulator was installed incorrectly. I've also recalibrated the power flow and replaced a worn coupling. Should give you another 10,000 shots, easy." Hefted the rifle, his experienced hands immediately noticing the subtle differences. The weapon felt solid again, its familiar weight properly balanced. He activated the charge indicator and his eyes widened at the reading. Impossible, this shows full power efficiency, better than when I first acquired it. I made a few improvements while I was in there. The power flow was inefficient. The workshop fell silent. In culture, weapons were sacred. For an outsider, especially a supposedly inferior human, to not only repair but improve upon their equipment was unprecedented. "You did not simply fix my rifle," said slowly. "You made it better." Standard human engineering practice. If you're going to open something up anyway, might as well optimize it. The alien captain exchanged glances with his crew, a rapid series of clicks and growls that didn't understand but could interpret well enough. Surprise, confusion, and perhaps a hint of respect. "Tell me, human engineer," said, "what do you know of the hegemony?" Had heard whispers in the outer colonies. The hegemony was a loose alliance of the galaxy's most powerful species, and a few others. They controlled trade routes, set technological standards, and generally treated everyone else as second-class citizens. Humanity had applied for membership 3 times and been rejected each time. I know they don't think much of human technology. Indeed, they have recently issued a challenge to all lesser species. A competition, they call it. 3 trials to test engineering, strategy, and combat capability. The winner gains full membership in their exclusive club, along with access to their most advanced technologies. Felt a spark of interest despite himself, and you're planning to enter. We are raiders, not builders. Our strength lies in battle, not in crafting machines. But the prize? His eyes gleamed. Access to hegemony shipyards, weapon designs, navigation charts to unexplored systems. It would make us the most powerful raider clan in the Outer Rim. So you need an engineer. We need the best engineer we can find. And despite what the galaxy thinks of human technology, I have just seen proof that human engineers may be underestimated. Set down his tools, considering the offer. It was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd been looking for, a chance to prove that human ingenuity was worth something in this vast galaxy. But it was also dangerous. The hegemony didn't issue challenges lightly, and the competition would attract the best minds from dozens of species. What exactly would these trials involve? Activated a holographic display, showing details downloaded from the hegemony's public networks. The first trial is pure engineering. Contestants must design and build a functional spacecraft using only provided materials and basic tools. They will be judged on efficiency, innovation, and practical capability. The specifications scrolled past and felt his pulse quicken. The materials list was extensive but chaotic, components from different technological traditions that were never meant to work together. It was exactly the kind of challenge that had defined his entire career. The second trial tests strategic thinking and leadership. Teams must navigate a simulated star system while managing resources and responding to various crises. The final trial paused. Single combat between team leaders, using weapons and equipment they have designed themselves. You want me to fight? I want you to build weapons that can defeat the finest warriors of the hegemony's member species. Leave the fighting to me. Studied the alien captain's face, nodding the confidence that radiated from every gesture. Was clearly a seasoned warrior, but the hegemony species had access to personal shielding, energy weapons, and armor technologies that were centuries ahead of anything humans had developed. The competition is in 2 months, continued. We would have that time to prepare, to design and test our equipment. I can provide a workshop, materials, whatever you need. In return, you help us win and we split the prize. Access to hegemony technology would benefit both our species. It was a generous offer, more than generous. Most aliens wouldn't even consider sharing advanced technology with humans, but sensed there was more to this than simple partnership. Why me? You could probably find or engineers who'd work for the right price. Grin returned, because they would approach the problem like they would use their own familiar technologies, think within their own limitations. But you fixed my rifle using principles I don't understand, combined technologies that should not work together, and made improvements that our best weaponsmiths never considered. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The hegemony expects certain solutions from certain species. They prepare their defenses accordingly, but human thinking, that is an unknown variable. and in my experience, unknown variables win battles. Looked around the workshop again, taking in the eclectic mix of tools and technologies. For the first time in months, he felt genuine excitement about a project. This wasn't just about proving himself anymore. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity deserved a seat at the table. All right, I'm in. The alien captain's hand shot out, grasping in a grip that could have crushed stone. Excellent. We leave for the neutral testing grounds in 1 week. That gives us time to gather additional resources and begin preliminary designs. As they shook hands, noticed something in his eyes that he hadn't expected. Hope. Despite his warrior's pride and raider's confidence, knew this competition was their species' one chance to join the galactic elite. The weight of that responsibility settled on shoulders like a familiar burden. He'd spent his entire career being underestimated, dismissed as just another human engineer working with primitive technology. Now he had the chance to turn that underestimation into an advantage. The hegemony wouldn't see them coming. But first, they had to survive the trials themselves. Over the following days, threw himself into research with an intensity that surprised even himself. The Blood Fang's computer systems gave him access to technical databases from across known space, and he studied everything from dimensional mathematics to biomechanical interfaces. The more he learned, the more excited he became. Each species had developed along different technological paths, creating specialized solutions for specific problems. But none of them seemed to consider combining approaches the way humans instinctively did. They were like master craftsmen who had perfected their individual techniques but never learned to collaborate. "You study much," observed one evening, finding hunched over in the ship's common area. "Do you see possibilities?" "More than possibilities, I see opportunities," gestured to the technical schematics surrounding him. "Your people, you build for intimidation and raw power, the focus on elegance and dimensional manipulation, create perfect crystalline matrices but struggle with flexibility. And he paused, studying a biomechanical schematic. "They grow their technology rather than building it." "And humans?" Smiled. "We improvise, we adapt. We take whatever's available and make it work even if it shouldn't, especially if it shouldn't." The alien captain settled into a chair that groaned under his weight. "Tell me your plan." "The first trial requires building a functional spacecraft from mixed components. Most teams will probably try to stick with familiar technologies, teams using components, using crystalline matrices, and so on. But we're going to do something different." Pulled up a rough schematic he'd been working on. "We're going to build a hybrid. Biomechanical systems for self-repair and adaptation, computing cores for navigation and control, dimensional folding for the drive system, and weapon integration for defense. Plus a few human modifications to tie it all together." Studied the design with growing amazement. "This is ambitious, perhaps too ambitious. These technologies were never meant to work together." "That's exactly why it'll work. The judges will expect conventional approaches because that's what makes sense to them. But if we can prove that hybrid technology is not only possible but superior," he let the implications hang in the air. "The second trial, resource management and crisis response. That's where human adaptability really shines. We're used to making do with less, finding creative solutions when the obvious ones don't work. Plus, with a ship that can literally evolve and adapt to new situations, we'll have advantages other teams won't." Nodded slowly, and the combat trial. His expression grew serious. "That one's going to be the real challenge. Personal combat tech is where the hegemony species really excel. But I've been thinking about unconventional approaches. Weapons that don't look like weapons, armor that doesn't look like armor, if we can surprise them." "You have ideas?" "A few, but I'll need to see what materials are available at the testing grounds before I can finalize anything." Leaned back, suddenly aware of how tired he was. "The key is going to be making sure they keep underestimating us right up until it's too late." The next morning brought unexpected visitors to the Blood Fang. Was calibrating a sensor array when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. He rushed to the bridge to find, and his crew in heated discussion with something on the main. The being addressing them was unlike anything had seen before, tall and ethereal, its form seeming to shift between solid matter and pure energy. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that made his teeth ache. "Merely wish to observe the human engineer we have heard so much about. the entity was saying. Word of his, modifications, to weaponry has reached interested parties. And who exactly are these interested parties? Demanded. Those who have a vested interest in the upcoming competition. The human's reputation precedes him. Stepped forward, ignoring's warning growl. My reputation, I'm nobody special. The entity's attention shifted to him and felt a peculiar sensation, as if he were being examined at the molecular level. Ah, but you are quite wrong about that. Your work has been noticed. The plasma rifle modification alone represents innovation that challenges certain assumptions. What assumptions? That human technology is primitive, that human engineers lack the sophistication to work with advanced systems, that humanity poses no threat to the established order. The entity paused, its form solidifying slightly. These assumptions may prove to be incorrect. A chill ran down spine. This wasn't just about the competition anymore. It was about proving humanity's worth to a galaxy that had already written them off. And apparently, someone was worried enough to send observers. Who are you? He asked directly. I am merely a representative of concerned parties. Consider this a friendly warning. The competition will be more challenging than you anticipate. Your opponents will not underestimate you as they have in the past. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Turned to find studying him with new intensity. It seems, human engineer, that your reputation has grown beyond my ship. This changes things. How so? The competition was meant to be a test of skill and innovation. But if the hegemony is already sending observers, already worried about unknown variables, grin was fierce and predatory. Then perhaps we represent more of a threat than even I realized. Felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. Recognition was what he'd always wanted, but not the kind that painted a target on his back. Still, there was no backing down now. Too much was at stake, both for him personally and for humanity as a whole. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for whatever they throw at us. The week passed quickly as they made final preparations, refined his designs, tested component compatibility, and ran countless simulations of potential scenarios. Drilled with his crew, ensuring they were ready for whatever challenges awaited. As they approached the neutral testing grounds, a massive space station in an uninhabited star system got his first look at the competition. Ships representing dozens of species filled the station's docking bays. Sleek cruisers sat next to crystalline vessels, while the organic curves of bioships contrasted sharply with the angular aggression of various raider clans. Second thoughts? Asked, noticing's expression. Just calculating odds, replied, and trying to figure out which of those ships belongs to whoever sent that observer. They docked without incident, though noticed the extra security sweeps their ship received. Apparently word really had spread about the human engineer and his allies. The competition briefing was held in the station's main assembly hall, a vast space designed to accommodate beings of every conceivable size and atmospheric requirement. Found himself surrounded by the finest engineering minds in the galaxy, and despite his growing confidence, he felt a familiar stab of inadequacy. These weren't just engineers. They were the representatives of civilizations that had mastered technologies humanity could barely comprehend, whose crystalline bodies were living computers, whose understanding of dimensional physics allowed them to fold space-time like origami, bioengineers who could grow starships from genetic templates. And then there was him, a human with a toolbox and an attitude. The competition rules were exactly as had described, but seeing them presented formally made the challenge seem even more daunting. 3 trials, each designed to test different aspects of engineering excellence. The materials provided would be extensive but chaotic, a deliberate test of adaptation and innovation. Teams will have 72 hours for the first trial, the hegemony administrator announced. Functionality and innovation will be weighted equally with efficiency and practicality. Remember, the goal is not merely to build a spacecraft, but to demonstrate the technological philosophy of your species. As the briefing concluded and teams began to disperse, notice something interesting. Several of the other engineers were studying him and with obvious curiosity. Word of the human partnership had definitely spread, and not everyone seemed pleased about it. A group of approached, their crystalline forms refracting the hall's lighting into rainbow patterns. When they spoke, their voices harmonized in perfect pitch. Human engineer, we have analyzed reports of your recent modifications to weaponry. The approach shows unexpected sophistication. It wasn't exactly a compliment, but coming from it was close. Thank you. I look forward to seeing what your team creates. As do we. The lead's form shifted, patterns of light dancing through its crystal matrix. Tell us, do you truly believe hybrid technologies can compete with purpose-built systems? Smiled, I guess we'll find out. As the moved away, leaned close. They are worried. I have never seen show uncertainty before. Good, worried opponents make mistakes. But even as he said it, felt the weight of expectations settling on his shoulders. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see if the human engineer could deliver on his reputation. The galaxy's assumptions about humanity were about to be tested in the most public way possible. Time would tell if those assumptions were their opening mistake, or his last chance to prove them wrong. The materials warehouse was a maze of technological components that boggled the mind. Entire sections were devoted to different species technologies. Dimensional matrices hummed with contained energy, crystal cores pulsed with computational power, and biomechanical systems twitched with artificial life. And crews spent their first hour just cataloging what was available, identifying components, and calculating compatibility. It was like being turned loose in the galaxy's greatest hardware store, except nothing was designed to work with anything else. The team has claimed an entire section of dimensional components, one of warriors reported. They have taken most of the crystal matrices. Let them, said, studying a biomechanical interface with growing excitement. They're thinking conventionally, we're going to build something none of them expect. The key insight had come to him during the briefing. Every other team was approaching this as an engineering challenge, build the best spacecraft possible using familiar technologies, but was approaching it as a systems integration problem. The goal wasn't just to create a functional ship, but to demonstrate a new paradigm. I need your people to gather specific components. Nothing flashy, nothing that looks obviously powerful. In fact, if the other teams are ignoring it, that's probably what we want. Over the next 6 hours, they assembled an eclectic collection of components that made even crew nervous. Discarded biomechanical interfaces from the section, dimensional stability matrices that the teams had deemed too small, computational cores with apparent flaws in their crystal structure, and a hodgepodge of power systems that no sane engineer would try to integrate. This looks like scrap, one of the warriors muttered. That's the idea, replied, already deep in assembly mode. We want them to think we don't know what we're doing. The design that emerged over the following day was unlike anything in the warehouse. Instead of a single, monolithic spacecraft, was creating something modular and adaptive. The core was built around a hybrid biomechanical system that could literally grow and evolve in response to changing conditions. Computational matrices provided the neural network for distributed intelligence, while dimensional technology allowed for impossible spatial configurations. Most importantly, every system was designed to work with every other system. The ship didn't just have redundancy, it had technological diversity that allowed it to adapt to virtually any situation. The propulsion system alone should be impossible, observed, watching calibrate the dimensional drive components. You are using biomechanical growth patterns to optimize dimensional folding efficiency. These technologies were never meant to interface. That's what makes it work, explained, his hands flying over the hybrid control systems. Each technology compensates for the other's weaknesses while amplifying their strengths. The biomechanical systems provide adaptability, the cores provide processing power, and the tech provides the raw capability to manipulate space-time. Word was spreading through the warehouse about the human team's unconventional approach. Other engineers began making excuses to wander past their work area and could see the confusion and concern in their expressions. What he was building shouldn't be possible, let alone functional. But it was working. More than working, it was exceeding every projection he'd made. As the final day of the trial began, teams started activating their creations for testing and evaluation. The sound that echoed through the warehouse was like a symphony of different technologies, the harmonic resonance of systems, the dimensional static of drives, the organic pulses of bioships. This hybrid ship came online with a sound unlike any of them, a complex harmony that incorporated elements of every technology it contained. When it lifted off the assembly platform, several other teams actually stopped working to stare. "Impossible," whispered an engineer. "The harmonic frequencies should create destructive interference. Biomechanical systems cannot interface with crystalline matrices," stated with absolute certainty. And yet, his grin was savage with satisfaction. The ship moved through the testing course with fluid grace, its biomechanical components adapting the dimensional field configuration in real time, while the neural networks calculated optimal efficiency parameters. When the judges threw emergency scenarios at it, system failures, power fluctuations, navigation hazards, the hybrid vessel adapted and compensated faster than the test computers could generate new challenges. Most importantly, it was fast. Faster than any single technology ship in the competition, because it wasn't limited by the constraints of any single approach. The judge's reaction was everything it hoped for and more. The panel of hegemony representatives stared at their instruments in obvious confusion, running diagnostic after diagnostic to confirm what they were seeing. "Team designation human hybrid," the lead judge announced finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Functionality rating superior, innovation rating unprecedented, efficiency rating optimal, practical capability rating exceptional." A murmur ran through the assembled teams. Those were the highest ratings anyone had seen in the competition's history. "However," the judge continued, and felt his heart skip, "the design philosophy represented requires further evaluation. The judges reserve the right to investigate the theoretical foundations of hybrid technological integration." It wasn't quite the victory had hoped for, but it was something even better, recognition that they'd fundamentally changed the game. The hegemony hadn't just been impressed, they'd been forced to acknowledge that their basic assumptions about technology might be wrong. As teams dispersed to prepare for the second trial, found himself surrounded by engineers from a dozen different species, all asking questions about integration techniques and hybrid system management. For the first time in his career, he wasn't being dismissed or underestimated. He was being studied. "You have created something unprecedented," an engineer admitted, her dimensional form flickering with what might have been respect. "Our preliminary analysis suggests efficiency improvements of 30 to 40% over conventional designs." "How is this possible?" demanded a bioengineer, his features clicking with agitation. "Biomechanical systems require organic development patterns that should be incompatible with crystalline computational matrices." Smiled, enjoying the attention but careful not to reveal too much. "Human engineering principle, if it works, it works. We don't worry too much about whether it should work." That evening, found in their assigned quarters, staring out at the stars visible through the station's viewports. "You are troubled by your success. I'm worried about what comes next. The second trial is about leadership and resource management under pressure. That's going to be harder to fake our way through." Fake's expression was genuinely puzzled. "Human, what you accomplished today was not deception. It was innovation of the highest order. You have proven that human engineering deserves respect." Turned from the viewport. "But can we prove that human leadership does? The second trial isn't about building things. It's about making decisions, managing resources, adapting to changing circumstances. That's going to test more than just technical ability." "Then it is fortunate that humans excel at adaptation," pointed out. "Your species has survived and thrived in more diverse environments than any other in the galaxy. You have built civilizations on worlds that should be uninhabitable, created solutions from resources that should be insufficient." The alien captain moved to stand beside him at the viewport. "The hegemony species became powerful by perfecting their specialized approaches, but specialization creates limitations. Today you proved that hybrid solutions can exceed specialized ones. Tomorrow, you will prove that adaptive leadership can outperform rigid doctrine." Nodded, feeling some of his confidence returning. The first trial had been about proving human technical competence. The second would be about proving human strategic thinking. And if there was one thing humans had always been good at, it was finding ways to win when everyone expected them to lose. The galaxy was beginning to realize that underestimating humanity had been their opening mistake. Now it was time to show them just how costly that mistake could be. The second trial arena was a massive holographic simulation chamber that could recreate entire star systems with perfect fidelity. stood on the observation deck, watching as technicians calibrated the environmental parameters for the upcoming test. Below them, 12 teams prepared their command stations, each designed to accommodate different species' physiological and technological requirements. The scenario parameters will be randomized for each team, the chief judge explained to the assembled competitors. You will face resource scarcity, natural disasters, hostile encounters, and technological failures. The test measures not only your ability to complete objectives, but how efficiently you adapt to unexpected challenges while maintaining team cohesion. Exchanged glances with. The captain had assembled a crew of his most experienced raiders for this trial, warriors who had survived countless battles through quick thinking and tactical flexibility. But leading a raiding party was different from managing complex resource allocation under pressure. Team Human Hybrid, please report to Simulation Chamber 7, came the announcement. Their assigned chamber was smaller than it expected, designed to create a sense of isolation and pressure. 5 control stations surrounded a central holographic display that would show their simulated star system in real time. Took the command position naturally, while his warriors, and positioned themselves at tactical stations. That left at the engineering station, responsible for managing technological resources, ship systems, and adaptation protocols. It was exactly where he wanted to be. Simulation initializing, the computer announced. Scenario: colonial evacuation and resource recovery in the system. Your fleet consists of 3 cargo haulers, 2 escort fighters, and 1 command vessel. Mission parameters will be provided as simulation begins. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a star system in crisis. The primary star was showing signs of instability. Solar flares were increasing in frequency and intensity, threatening the terraformed colony worlds in the inner system. 3 planets held human settlements totaling nearly 50,000 colonists, plus strategic resource deposits that were vital to the regional economy. Evacuation fleet arriving in system, the computer continued. Available time before stellar crisis reaches critical threshold, 72 hours simulated time. Begin. Immediately, a flood of information began streaming across their stations. Colony populations, resource locations, transportation capabilities, fuel consumption rates, and a dozen other variables that all needed to be balanced against the ticking clock of stellar collapse. Quickly pulled up fleet specifications while assessed the tactical situation. The ships they'd been assigned were typical colonial-grade vessels, reliable but not particularly advanced. More importantly, they didn't have enough cargo capacity to evacuate everyone and recover the strategic resources. Standard evacuation protocol suggests prioritizing population centers, reported from his tactical station. However, cargo capacity limits prevent full evacuation within time constraints. What are our options? Demanded. Was already running calculations, his fingers dancing over the engineering controls. We can evacuate approximately 60% of the population using conventional loading procedures, or we can modify the cargo haulers to increase capacity. Modifications require time and resources, pointed out, time we may not have. Not necessarily. Pulled up the ship schematics, highlighting specific systems. These haulers use modular cargo bay configurations. We can reconfigure them for emergency passenger transport, but it means leaving the resource recovery equipment behind. Studied the display, his tactical mind weighing options. What about the resources? The mission parameters specify their strategic importance. That's where it gets interesting. Highlighted several asteroid mining platforms scattered throughout the system. We don't have to physically transport the resources. We can set up automated extraction and processing systems that will continue working even after we evacuate. The automated platforms can package refined materials for later pickup by other vessels. It was a distinctly human approach to the problem. Instead of trying to do everything at once, they would create systems that could continue working independently. But it required precise coordination and flawless execution. What's our status on available modification materials? Asked. Limited but sufficient if we cannibalize non-essential systems from the escort fighters, came the reply. Do it. Plot evacuation routes that maximize passenger recovery while minimizing fuel consumption. Coordinate with the colony administrators. I want population centers prioritized by vulnerability and transportation efficiency. Dove into the modification procedures, working to reconfigure 3 cargo haulers simultaneously. The simulation didn't just test leadership, it tested the team's ability to execute complex plans under pressure. Every modification had to be balanced against time constraints, resource availability, and the growing threat of stellar radiation. 30 minutes into the simulation, the first crisis hit. A massive solar flare erupted from the unstable star, causing widespread power failures across the second planet's colony infrastructure. Power grid failure on II, reported. Colony population of 12,000 is without life support. Emergency power reserves estimated at 6 hours. Expression hardened. This was exactly the kind of cascading failure that turned manageable situations into disasters. Options. Was already analyzing the situation. The power failure is due to radiation overload in the primary fusion reactors. We can reroute power from the automated mining platforms, but it means delaying resource extraction. Acceptable loss, decided immediately, save the colonists. It was the right call, but could see the broader implications. Every deviation from the optimal plan reduced their overall efficiency rating. They were being forced to choose between mission objectives and humanitarian concerns, exactly the kind of leadership test the hegemony was looking for. Implementing power rerouting, announced, his fingers flying over the controls. Fusion reactors on II back online, colony life support restored. But the crisis had cost them precious time and resources. The cargo hauler modifications were behind schedule, and the automated mining deployment was delayed. Could see calculating odds, weighing risks against potential gains. Status report, the captain demanded. Cargo modifications 60% complete, responded. Evacuation can begin in 40 minutes. Mining platform deployment delayed but still viable, added. Resource recovery efficiency reduced to 75% of optimal. Population evacuation priorities confirmed with colony administrators, reported. Critical personnel and vulnerable populations identified for priority transport. Watched the stellar activity monitors with growing concern. The star's instability was accelerating faster than the simulation parameters had initially suggested. They were facing another cascade failure, this one potentially system-wide. We have a problem. Stellar flare activity is increasing beyond initial projections. The automated mining platforms won't survive the radiation surge. The alien captain studied the stellar projection, his tactical mind working through alternatives. Can we harden the platforms against radiation? Not with available resources, admitted. But we can modify the extraction procedures. Instead of slow, careful mining, we switch to rapid strip mining techniques. Lower total yield, but we can complete extraction in half the time. Environmental impact. Significant. The mining sites will be completely depleted and uninhabitable for decades. It was another impossible choice. Environmental responsibility versus mission success, long-term consequences versus immediate needs. Could see why the hegemony used this scenario. It forced leaders to make the kind of decisions that revealed their fundamental priorities. This decision came without hesitation. Implement rapid extraction. The colonies are already being evacuated. Environmental concerns are secondary to mission completion. It was a hard choice, but the right one given their constraints. Began reconfiguring the mining protocols while the rest of the team coordinated evacuation efforts. The cargo haulers were finally ready for passenger transport, their holds reconfigured with emergency life support and basic amenities. The evacuation began just as the second crisis hit. Long-range sensors detecting approaching vessels, announced. Configuration suggests pirate raiders, estimated arrival in 20 minutes. Felt his blood chill. Pirates attacking during an evacuation was a nightmare scenario, especially with their escort fighters partially cannibalized for modification materials. How many? Demanded. 5 ships, unknown class, but they're moving fast and broadcasting no identification signals. His expression shifted into pure predator mode. This was his element, tactical combat under impossible odds. Defensive options. Limited, admitted. Our escorts are partially disabled from the modifications. The cargo haulers are unarmed and loaded with civilians. But not helpless, interjected, pulling up the modification schematics. The systems we removed from the escorts, we can repurpose them as makeshift defensive platforms, mount them on the mining platforms, and use them as stationary weapon emplacements. It was improvised and desperate, but it might work. The mining platforms were already positioned throughout the system, and their industrial power systems could support improvised weapon arrays. "Do it," ordered. Coordinate the civilian evacuation, maximum loading, minimum safety margins. Prepare the command vessel for combat. We're going to buy time for the evacuation to complete." The next 20 minutes were chaos. Worked frantically to convert mining lasers into weapon systems while the team coordinated evacuation procedures and defensive preparations. The approaching pirates were fast and well-armed, clearly intending to raid the evacuation fleet for both cargo and hostages. When the attack came, it was swift and brutal. The pirate ships swept through the outer system like wolves, testing defensive positions and probing for weaknesses. Commanded the response with precision born of years of combat experience, using the converted mining platforms as force multipliers while the lone functional escort fighter harassed the enemy formation. "Cargo hauler 1 loaded to maximum capacity," reported, departing for safe distance. "Hauler 2 70% loaded," came the next update. Loading rate decreasing due to civilian panic. The pirates were pressing their attack, focusing fire on the improvised defensive platforms. Watched his hastily converted weapons taking damage, their industrial components never designed for military use failing under combat stress. "Mining Platform 3 is down," announced. "Platform 5 showing critical damage." "How much more time do we need?" demanded. 20 minutes for full evacuation," responded. 15 if we abandon non-essential cargo. "And resource extraction." "Complete," reported. "All viable materials packaged and ready for pickup. The automated systems worked perfectly." Made another instant decision. Abandon non-essential cargo, focus on people. Prepare the command vessel for ramming speed. "Sir, we're going to break their formation. One concentrated attack to disrupt their coordination, then we run. The evacuation fleet gets clear while they're regrouping." It was a classic tactic. Sacrifice the small to save the large, use aggression to create opportunity. But it was also incredibly risky, especially with civilians depending on their success. The attack was everything expected from leadership. The command vessel dove straight into the pirate formation, weapons blazing, forcing them to scatter or risk collision. The remaining escort fighter followed, adding its firepower to the assault. The pirates broke formation exactly as predicted, their disciplined attack dissolving into individual dogfights. In the confusion, the cargo haulers reached minimum safe distance, their precious cargo of 47,000 colonists secure. "Simulation complete," the computer announced. "Final assessment commencing." Slumped in his chair, exhausted from the intense coordination required. They'd saved the colonists, recovered most of the strategic resources, and fought off a pirate attack. But had they done well enough to impress the judges? The debriefing was conducted by the same panel of hegemony representatives who'd evaluated the first trial. Their expressions were unreadable as they reviewed performance metrics and tactical decisions. "Team Human Hybrid," the lead judge began. "Population evacuation 94% successful. Resource recovery 87% of strategic materials secured. Combat effectiveness, enemy force neutralized with minimal losses. Adaptation to crisis situations exceptional." Felt a surge of relief, but the judge wasn't finished. "However, several of your tactical decisions require explanation. The environmental damage from rapid extraction procedures was severe. The improvised weapon conversions violated standard safety protocols. The ramming attack placed civilian vessels at unnecessary risk." Stood to respond, his bearing proud and defiant. "Honored judges, we prioritized mission success and civilian safety above regulatory compliance. The environmental damage was temporary. The weapon conversions were effective within operational parameters. The ramming attack succeeded in its objective. And if the attack had failed, then we would have died fighting, and the evacuation fleet would have had additional time to reach safety. The risk was calculated and acceptable." The judges exchanged glances and caught something in their expressions, not disapproval but surprise, maybe even respect. The tactical thinking demonstrated shows remarkable adaptability, another judge admitted. The resource management efficiency exceeded optimal projections despite multiple crisis scenarios. The improvised solutions displayed innovation under pressure. The lead judge nodded slowly. Most significantly, the team maintained cohesion and effectiveness throughout cascading failures that have defeated previous competitors. The hybrid approach to problem-solving, combining tactical aggression with human adaptive engineering, produced results that neither species could have achieved independently. Felt his heart racing. That was as close to a compliment as the hegemony was likely to give. Final rating, superior performance with exceptional adaptation metrics. Team Human Hybrid advances to the final trial. As they left the simulation chamber, noticed the looks from other teams. Some were respectful, others calculating, and a few showed obvious hostility. Word was spreading that the human engineer and his allies weren't just lucky, they were genuinely competitive. 2 trials down, said quietly as they walked toward their quarters. 1 to go. The hardest one, replied. Personal combat using self-designed equipment. Everything we've accomplished so far comes down to whether your weapons and armor can defeat the finest warriors in the galaxy. Our weapons and armor, corrected. You design, I fight, partnership, remember. Nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to the challenges of the final trial. Combat was where the hegemony species truly excelled. Phase shifters who could become temporarily intangible, warriors whose crystalline bodies were living armor, bioengineers who could modify themselves during battle. How did you design weapons to defeat opponents who could rewrite the fundamental rules of combat? The answer, realized, was the same as it had been all along. You didn't play by their rules, you created new ones. That night he began sketching designs that would have seemed impossible a week ago. Weapons that didn't look like weapons, armor that wasn't armor, strategies that turned an opponent's strengths into weaknesses. The galaxy had underestimated human ingenuity twice now. The third time would be their last mistake. But first, he had to make sure survived long enough to prove it. The next morning brought disturbing news. As and reviewed equipment specifications for the final trial, an urgent message appeared on their communication console. The holographic display showed the same ethereal entity that had visited them aboard the Blood Fang. Of the Blood Fang, your performance has been unexpected. Unexpected how? Asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Hegemony Council has been following your progress with great interest. Your hybrid technologies and adaptive strategies have prompted significant discussion among member species. There are those who feel your approach represents a fundamental challenge to established technological paradigms. Stepped forward, his posture aggressive. Speak plainly, energy being, are you here to threaten us? Quite the opposite, I am here to warn you. The final trial has been modified in response to your unexpected success. Your opponents will not be random selections from the remaining teams. Felt ice forming in his stomach. What do you mean? The hegemony has decided to test your hybrid approach against their finest champions. You will face representatives specifically chosen for their mastery of advanced combat technologies. Warriors who have never been defeated in personal combat. The implications hit like a physical blow. They weren't just competing anymore. They were being tested by the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and if they failed, it wouldn't just be a loss. It would be a demonstration that hybrid approaches were inferior to specialized mastery. Why are you warning us? Demanded. The entity's form shimmered, becoming more solid. Because there are some within the hegemony who believe your approach has merit, who think the galaxy would benefit from new perspectives and technologies. But they are outnumbered by those who see you as a threat to the established order. And which side are you on? I am on the side of progress, which is why I suggest you focus your preparations carefully. Your opponents will be of the Dimensional Guard, Resonance Prime of the Combat Collective, and Bio-Admiral Al of the War Forms. Had heard of all 3 names, legends in their respective species, warriors who had achieved near-mythical status through their mastery of advanced combat techniques. Could phase through solid matter and strike from dimensions his opponents couldn't perceive. Resonance Prime was a whose crystalline body could reorganize itself instantaneously to counter any attack. Al was a bioengineer who could literally evolve new capabilities during combat. 3 opponents, asked, his voice carefully controlled. Sequential combat, standard tournament format, victory requires defeating all 3 champions. After the entity's message ended and sat in silence for long minutes, finally the alien captain spoke. They mean to crush us publicly, to demonstrate that individual excellence trumps hybrid innovation. Probably, agreed, but that also means they're afraid of what we represent. Otherwise, why stack the deck so heavily? Can you design weapons capable of defeating such opponents? Pulled up his design files, looking at the sketches and concepts he'd been developing. They were unconventional to the point of seeming impossible, but the hybrid ship had seemed impossible too. I think so, but it's going to require trusting approaches that violate everything conventional wisdom says about combat. Show me. The designs revealed were unlike any weapons system either of them had seen before. Instead of trying to match the hegemony champion's specialized capabilities, they focused on unpredictability and adaptation. The primary weapon looked like a simple staff, but it contained hybrid biomechanical systems that could reconfigure themselves in real time. Defensive capabilities were built into a seemingly ordinary garment that combined computational matrices with adaptive materials and dimensional folding. The key is to never fight their fight, explained. Expects opponents to try matching his dimensional capabilities. Resonance Prime anticipates conventional attacks against crystalline matrices. Assumes his biomechanical advantages will overwhelm static equipment. And our approach? Chaos, unpredictability. We use weapons that don't behave like weapons, defenses that don't function like armor, and tactics that make no sense from their specialized perspectives. Studied the schematics with growing understanding. You are weaponizing the unexpected. Exactly. Human warfare has always been about adaptation and innovation under pressure. We're going to fight the way humans fight, by refusing to accept limitations. The next 48 hours were a blur of intense preparation. Worked around the clock to fabricate his designs using the equipment stockpiled from previous trials. The hybrid biomechanical systems were particularly challenging, requiring precise integration of technologies that had never been combined before. Meanwhile, trained with the new equipment, learning to use weapons that functioned unlike anything in military tradition. The learning curve was steep, but the alien warrior's natural adaptability served him well. The weapon configurations are unlike anything I have experienced, he admitted during one training session. But they respond to intent rather than technique. It is liberating. Watched practice with the adaptive staff, noting how the biomechanical systems responded to his aggressive fighting style by optimizing for power and reach. The same weapon would configure differently for different users, making it nearly impossible for opponents to predict its capabilities. That's the idea. Your 3 opponents are masters of specific techniques developed over centuries, but mastery creates patterns, and patterns can be exploited. On the final day before the combat trial, they received another unexpected visitor. This time, it was a delegation of engineers from several of the competing teams, led by the who had spoken to after the first trial. Human engineer, she said formally. We come to request information about your hybrid integration techniques. Exchanged glances with. This was unprecedented, competitors asking for technical assistance from rivals. What kind of information? The theoretical foundations of your approach. Our analysis suggests efficiency improvements that could benefit all species, but the mathematical principles remain unclear. It was a moment of decision. Could share his knowledge and potentially help these engineers advance their own technologies, or he could maintain his competitive advantage. The mathematical principles are actually quite simple, he said finally. Instead of trying to optimize individual systems, you optimize the interfaces between systems. You design for compatibility and adaptability rather than peak performance. The engineer's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. But this should result in compromised performance across all metrics. Only if you assume that peak performance in isolation is more valuable than adaptive performance under changing conditions. But real-world applications rarely occur in isolation. Pulled up a diagram showing how his hybrid systems worked. Look at your own technologies. Computational matrices are incredibly powerful but inflexible. Dimensional systems are elegant but require enormous power. Biomechanical systems are adaptive but slow to optimize. He highlighted the interface points in his designs. But if you combine them properly, the matrices can provide the computational power for real-time optimization of dimensional fields, while biomechanical systems can provide the adaptive hardware platform for both. The assembled engineers stared at the diagrams with growing amazement. One of the team members clicked excitedly. This suggests possible efficiency improvements of 60 to 70% over specialized approaches. The applications to civilian technology alone. Exactly, said. This isn't just about winning competitions, it's about fundamentally advancing how we think about technology integration. The engineer's dimensional form stabilized completely, apparently a sign of deep concentration. You share this knowledge freely, despite our competition. Because it's bigger than competition. If these techniques can improve technologies across all species, everyone benefits. That's worth more than any prize. After the delegation left, looked at with something approaching amazement. You just gave away advantages that could ensure our victory. Did I, or did I just demonstrate that human technology isn't a threat to the hegemony? It's an opportunity for the entire galaxy. The alien captain's grin was fierce and proud. You think like a warrior and fight like an engineer. Tomorrow, we show them what that combination can accomplish. The final trial arena was a vast combat space designed to accommodate the different environmental requirements of various species. Atmospheric controls, gravity fields, and terrain features could be adjusted in real time to create optimal conditions for different types of combat. Stood in the preparation area, making final adjustments to equipment. The hybrid weapon systems had performed perfectly during testing, but combat would be the ultimate test of their effectiveness. Remember, he said as donned the adaptive armor, don't try to match their specialized capabilities. Use unpredictability and adaptation to force them into situations where their specialization becomes a liability. Understood, and the alien warrior's voice was uncharacteristically serious. Whatever happens, know that you have already proven human worth. The galaxy will never underestimate your species again. As entered the arena for the first combat, joined the observation deck with other team leaders and hegemony officials. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew this wasn't just about individual combat anymore. It was about the future of technological development in the galaxy. The first opponent, of the Dimensional Guard, materialized in the center of the arena. His phase-shifting abilities allowed him to exist partially outside normal space-time, making him nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. But's weapon wasn't conventional. As the champion phased in and out of reality, the hybrid biomechanical systems tracked his dimensional signature, predicting his materialization points and adapting their configuration accordingly. The battle was unlike anything the arena had ever seen. Instead of trying to match dimensional mastery, used chaos and unpredictability to disrupt the carefully planned attacks. The adaptive weapon systems kept changing their fundamental properties, making it impossible for the champion to develop effective counter-strategies. When finally landed the winning blow, the arena erupted in stunned silence. The Dimensional Guard, who had never been defeated, lay unconscious, overwhelmed by tactics that made no sense from his specialized perspective. Felt a surge of fierce pride, but the hardest challenges lay ahead. 2 more legendary champions awaited, and each victory would only make the next opponent more desperate to prove their superiority. The real test was just beginning. The arena medical team carried from the combat zone, the dimensional warrior still unconscious from the final blow that had bypassed all his phase-shifting defenses. Watched from the observation deck as hegemony officials clustered around monitoring stations, their voices tight with concern and confusion. Dimensional phase shifting has been considered the ultimate defensive technique for over 3 centuries, one of them muttered. How did primitive hybrid technology penetrate defenses that energy weapons cannot breach? Caught fragments of their analysis as technicians reviewed combat recordings frame by frame. The champion's defeat hadn't been due to superior technology. It had been caused by pure unpredictability. The hybrid weapon systems had refused to follow conventional attack patterns, making defensive calculations worthless. The weapon configuration shifted 17 times during combat, another official reported. Each change was instantaneous and appeared to be triggered by the opponent's defensive adaptations. It's as if the weapon was learning and counter-adapting in real time. That was exactly what it had been doing, realized with satisfaction. The biomechanical systems he'd integrated weren't just adaptive, they were actively learning from their opponent's behavior and evolving countermeasures. It was technological evolution compressed into minutes rather than. Emerged from the arena breathing heavily but uninjured. The adaptive armor had performed perfectly, distributing the force of dimensional attacks across its biomechanical matrix. More importantly, the alien warrior's confidence was visibly growing. He just defeated a legendary champion using weapons and tactics that violated every conventional understanding of combat. "Status report," said quietly as joined him in the preparation area. The weapon systems exceeded projections. Each configuration change felt natural, intuitive. It was like fighting with extensions of my own body rather than external tools. The warrior examined his equipment with new respect. How much did the systems adapt during combat? More than I expected. The biomechanical components created entirely new configuration combinations that I never programmed. They were inventing new weapon forms in response to specific tactical situations. His eyes widened. The weapons were thinking. Not thinking exactly, more like evolving. The biomechanical systems combined with computational matrices to create something approaching technological instinct. Their conversation was interrupted by the arena announcer calling for the second match. Resonance Prime of the Combat Collective entered the arena like a living sculpture of perfect crystal, its faceted form refracting the arena, lighting into rainbow patterns that shifted with each movement. Had studied recordings of Resonance Prime's previous battles. The champion could reorganize its crystalline body structure instantaneously, creating perfect armor configurations to counter any attack while simultaneously optimizing its form for devastating counterstrikes. It was like fighting an opponent who could become the ideal response to every tactical decision you made. But that assumed your tactics were predictable. "Remember," said as prepared for the second combat, Resonance Prime's advantage comes from perfect adaptation to expected attack patterns, but the biomechanical systems create attack patterns that don't exist in any database. Understood, chaos over order. Adaptive chaos. Let the weapon systems evolve during combat, but guide their evolution toward your tactical objectives. The second battle began differently from the first. Where it had relied on defensive superiority, Resonance Prime opened with aggressive attacks designed to force its opponent into reactive patterns that could be analyzed and countered, but refused to be forced into any pattern at all. The hybrid weapon systems responded to each of the champion's attacks with completely different configurations, sometimes becoming a blade, sometimes a projectile launcher, sometimes energy weapon that fired bursts of contained dimensional distortion. Watched with fascination as the biomechanical systems began creating weapon configurations he'd never imagined. The integration of technologies was producing emergent behaviors, capabilities that arose from the complex interaction of different technological approaches rather than being programmed directly. Resonance Prime's perfect crystalline form began showing signs of stress. The champion's computational matrices were being overloaded by the need to constantly analyze and adapt to weapon systems that kept changing their fundamental nature. Every time it achieved perfect counter-optimization, the weapons evolved into something completely different. "Impossible," whispered an observer on the deck. "Resonance Prime's computational power exceeds entire planetary networks. How can it be by crude hybrid systems?" "Because it's not being realized. It's being out-adapted. Computational power doesn't matter if the problem keeps changing faster than you can solve it." The battle reached its climax when weapon systems evolved a configuration that had never conceived, a biomechanical web that could partially phase shift while maintaining solid weapon characteristics. It was as if the adaptive systems had learned from the previous battle and incorporated dimensional manipulation techniques into their evolutionary matrix. Resonance Prime's crystalline form shattered into a million fragments as the impossible weapon struck from multiple dimensional angles simultaneously. The champion's perfect computational adaptation had been defeated by a weapon that refused to remain consistent long enough to be analyzed. 2 down, 1 to go. But as the medical team tended to Resonance Prime's shattered form, apparently the crystalline being could recover from almost any structural damage. Notice something disturbing in the hegemony officials' expressions. They weren't just concerned anymore. They were angry. This violates fundamental principles of combat technology, one official was saying. Weapon systems cannot evolve during battle. It provides an insurmountable advantage to any species capable of hybrid integration. Perhaps that is precisely the point, came a familiar voice. The ethereal entity that had warned them appeared among the officials, its form more solid than had ever seen it. The human engineer has not simply created superior weapons, he has demonstrated a fundamentally different approach to technological development. An approach that makes centuries of specialized advancement irrelevant, another official snapped. If crude hybrid systems can defeat our finest champions, what value does mastery have? The same value it has always had, the entity replied calmly. But perhaps it is time to consider whether mastery of individual techniques is as valuable as mastery of integration and adaptation. Realized they were witnessing more than a competition. They were watching the birth of a technological revolution. The hybrid approaches he developed weren't just weapons or tools. They were proof that the galaxy's entire technological paradigm might be fundamentally flawed. The final opponent has been enhanced, the entity continued, its attention shifting to. Bioadmiral Al has been permitted to undergo emergency biomechanical optimization specifically designed to counter hybrid technologies. That's not fair, growled. Fair, the official who'd spoken earlier laughed bitterly. Your weapons evolve during combat. Your armor adapts faster than our champions can analyze it. Your tactics make no sense from any established strategic doctrine, and you speak of fairness. The entity's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. Ironically, you have just described why the hybrid approach is superior. It does not rely on fairness or established doctrine. It adapts to whatever conditions exist. As they prepared for the final battle, worked frantically to upgrade equipment one last time. If Al had been enhanced specifically to counter hybrid technologies, they needed to push their own adaptation capabilities even further. I'm integrating additional dimensional components, he explained as he recalibrated the weapon systems. If Al can counter our current configurations, we need to be able to access weapon forms that exist partially outside normal spacetime. Will the biomechanical systems be able to handle dimensional integration? I don't know. We're pushing into territory that no one has explored before. The adaptive systems might evolve capabilities I can't predict, or they might overload and fail completely. Tested the modified weapon, noting how its weight and balance shifted constantly as the internal systems reconfigured themselves. It feels alive, not just responsive, but genuinely alive. That's because it is, in a sense. The combination of biomechanics, computation, and dimensional manipulation has created something approaching artificial life, a weapon that can think, learn, and evolve. When Bioadmiral Al entered the arena, understood immediately why the hegemony officials had been so confident. The champion had been transformed into something that barely resembled its original form. Biomechanical enhancements covered every inch of its exoskeleton, and additional limbs had been grafted on to provide multiple weapon configurations simultaneously. But more disturbing than the physical modifications were the technological ones. Sensors detected energy signatures that suggested Al had been equipped with hybrid systems of its own, crude attempts to replicate the adaptive technologies that had given them their advantages. They're fighting hybrid with hybrid, he realized. Al has been turned into a living weapon specifically designed to counter our approach. The final battle was the most brutal yet. Where the previous opponents had been defeated by the unexpected nature of adaptive weapons, Al had been specifically programmed to expect and counter adaptation itself. The biomechanical enhancements allowed it to evolve its own capabilities in real time, creating an arms race between competing adaptive systems. For the first time in the competition, was forced to fight defensively. Al's enhanced form could match the hybrid weapon system's adaptation speed while bringing superior physical capabilities and multiple attack vectors to bear simultaneously. Watched with growing anxiety as the battle turned into a contest between competing evolutionary systems. Both weapons and AL's biomechanical enhancements were adapting and counter-adapting in an escalating spiral of technological arms race. "The hybrid systems are approaching overload," he muttered, monitoring the weapon's status displays. "The adaptation rate is exceeding sustainable parameters." But as he watched, something extraordinary happened. The weapon systems began adapting not just to AL's attacks, but to their own limitations. The biomechanical components started integrating with the dimensional systems in ways that bypassed normal energy constraints, while the computational matrices began processing adaptation algorithms that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The weapon was evolving beyond its original design parameters, becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly hybrid entity that combined the best characteristics of multiple technological traditions while transcending the limitations of any single approach. When's final attack connected, it was with a weapon that had evolved beyond wildest projections. The biomechanical systems had achieved dimensional phase shifting while maintaining computational processing and adaptive evolution. The strike bypassed AL's enhancements completely, defeating the Bioadmiral not through superior force, but through technological transcendence. The arena fell silent as AL collapsed, its enhanced biomechanical systems overloaded by an attack they had never been programmed to counter. 3 legendary champions lay defeated, overcome by weapons that had evolved during combat from simple hybrid systems into something approaching technological singularity. Slumped in his observation chair, exhausted from monitoring systems that had pushed far beyond their design limits. They'd won, but at the cost of proving that hybrid technology could exceed every existing paradigm. The implications were staggering. The awards ceremony was unlike anything in the competition's history. Instead of celebration, there was tension and uncertainty as hegemony officials struggled to process what they'd witnessed. "The victorious team has demonstrated capabilities that exceed current technological understanding," the lead judge announced formally. "However, the implications of hybrid adaptive systems require further evaluation before membership benefits can be conferred." Stepped forward, flanked by his crew. "With respect, honored judges, I think you're missing the real significance of what happened here." "Explain." "You're treating this like humanity defeated the hegemony, but that's not what happened. The hybrid approach doesn't replace specialized mastery, it enhances it. Every technology we used was developed by hegemony species. We just found ways to make them work better together." He gestured to the arena where the final battle had taken place. "Wasn't defeated by inferior technology. He was defeated by dimensional science combined with computation and biomechanics in ways that enhanced each individual component." The judges exchanged glances, clearly struggling with the implications. "The question isn't whether humanity deserves membership," continued. "The question is whether the galaxy is ready to embrace collaborative technological development instead of competitive technological isolation." "You propose what exactly?" "Partnership, real partnership. Not just trade agreements or limited technology sharing, but genuine collaboration between species to develop hybrid approaches that benefit everyone." The ethereal entity that had been observing stepped forward, its form now completely solid. "The human engineer speaks wisdom. The galaxy has spent pursuing technological advancement through specialization and competition. Perhaps it is time to explore advancement through integration and cooperation." "And if member species refuse such cooperation?" Smiled, gesturing to his crew. "Then they'll find themselves falling behind species that embrace hybrid approaches. They understood this immediately. Other species will too, once they see the advantages." The lead judge was quiet for long moments, considering. Finally, he spoke. "The Hegemony Council will convene to discuss these unprecedented circumstances. In the meantime, Team Human Hybrid is declared the winner of the technological innovation competition." "And membership." "That decision requires wider consultation than this tribunal can provide." As they left the arena, felt a mixture of triumph and uncertainty. They'd proven human technological worth beyond any doubt, But the real victory would come only if the galaxy embraced the collaborative approach they demonstrated.
Do you